Okay, communications students, we're going to be looking at Chapter 8. So you should have a study guide for Chapter 8 in the book, and we're going to be looking at the systems theory and group development. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking in the next couple weeks about how groups develop, how to manage the climate and the synergy of the group, and the different roles that people take within groups. So this is a great time to be talking about groups because you just took your first test in your groups, and you'll be doing your service project here in the next little bit. And so this is some of the theory and terminology that you need to know as you're working with groups. So when we say small group communication or small groups, what we mean is 3 or more people, but not more than 15, interacting for the achievement of some common purpose. So the group has to be united in an idea or a goal, whether that's to complete a project like your service project, or maybe you're working for a company and the company requires you to put together a proposal and a project for work, or maybe you get together as a team for a rec sports team or something like that. It doesn't matter, but you as a group have to have a common purpose. So 3 or more people, not more than 15. I once had a professor in college in one of my communications classes say the perfect size group is a group that can share a large pizza. And so he kind of thought that any more than what a large pizza could feed would be too complicated of a group. So that was sort of his gauge for a good group. The bigger the group gets, the more it loses effectiveness and the more complex the dynamics of the group. So you've probably all been a part of that as you've arranged dance groups or groups like group dates or things like that as you're trying to arrange details and trying to deal with lots of personalities. The bigger the group, the more complex it is and the harder it is to be effective. So obviously large groups are more complex. One of the theories of group theory is the transactional model, and it's the idea that a group is also made up of people who are influenced by the group and the group influences them. So you become changed by being a part of the group and the group can change its members. So that's when we're talking about small group communication, that's what we mean. A small group, less than 15 people, where each group member is united for a common purpose and influenced by the group and the group is influenced by them. That's a small group. There are 6 features of small groups, and the first we've talked about is the group size. So a minimum of 3 members and a maximum of 15. And second, this is a term we talked about with your service project, the interdependence. So you have the effect that you and your group have on each other. Both of these will play a part of a theory we're going to talk about in a minute called systems theory. But those are the 2 characteristics, or the 6 of the 6 features of a small group, ones we just talked about. You can see that when we talk about group size, and we mentioned this earlier, the bigger it gets, the more complex. The more cliques and factions form, so smaller groups sort of breaking off or getting together, and becoming smaller groups or cliques. Decision making becomes really difficult. Member satisfaction goes down, so your satisfaction with being in the group goes down. The pressure to perform in the group also decreases, so there become a lot of social loafers, so people who don't do anything because they feel like their voice doesn't matter or that it's too big to make a difference, and so they tend to just sort of sit back and let others do the work for them. And it can lead to something called group hate. Probably something you've all experienced, where you just don't want to work in groups, and it maybe comes from the size of the group. Think about the group of students at Davis High School. It's big, right? It's definitely more than 15. Think about how complex it is, how many different cliques and factions are formed. If we asked the entire student body to make a decision, it would be incredibly difficult, right, to come together and make a decision. There's often dissatisfaction being a part of such a big student body. There are definitely students who don't participate or do anything and maybe even hate the group that they're a part of. So it's a great example of how it's getting too big when these things start to occur. When I come back, we're going to do an activity that will show you the impact of group size, but we'll wait to do that till I get back. So in your group experience, sometime in your life, you're going to end up dealing with social loafers. And this little chart right here kind of shows you, what did I learn from group work? The information, how to work with other people, how to do projects on my own, and how much I hate other people. Usually what's caused this group hate is social loafers. So these are people who aren't doing anything in the group and just sort of letting the group carry them along. And it really frustrates the other group members. You'll run into this a lot, like in college study groups or things like that. You'll really have to deal with social loafers. Know that no one can really make up for a slacking member. It's really frustrating. You can compensate, but it's still going to really impact the group itself. So how do you deal with a social loafer when you get one in your group? Know that a great team means that everyone will get the reward if they're successful, which means that not everyone will not get the reward if they're not successful. So everybody needs to contribute equally to the project, and you know that that's in a effective group. So dealing with social loafers, there's a lot of tips for that. And the first thing you can do is really work to make sure that your group's climate, the way your group feels, is cooperative. So you want to make sure that everybody has a open mind and is approaching the group in a way that's cooperative. So nobody's competing with anybody else. It feels like you're all in this together. Something that really is effective is establishing norms. Norms are expectations or rules for behavior. So if you sit down as a group, perhaps your small group for this class, and you say, okay, when we're studying for the test, everybody puts their cell phone away and everybody's engaged in reviewing and studying at the same time. That's a norm. You've set up this expectation for behavior that you want to that you want the group members to abide by. So if you set up a norm that says everybody will do an equal share of the work, and sort of talk about that expectation in the beginning, it can eliminate the existence of someone slacking or troublemaking. Often people who are slacking or troublemaking feel like they're not valued. So giving them a task that matters, even though it's scary to do because you feel like they're not going to do it, can help them feel like they're in a cooperative group. We'll talk a little bit more about win-win, lose-win, and lose-lose compromises when we get to conflict in this unit towards the end, but that can definitely play a part into making sure your climate is cooperative so everybody's winning. The second thing you can do is change your communication in relation to a difficult person's behavior. Placating, ignoring, isolating sometimes can make the problem worse. So just avoiding the social loafer isn't gonna make it better, right? You just say we're gonna let them sit off to the side. That can often make the problem worse. Try not to give them too much attention. Sometimes people will social loaf because they want attention, and they want people to pay attention to them or ask them what's wrong or give them special attention. So try not to give them a soapbox where they can kind of, take all your time and energy and really say our goal is to get this service project done, or our goal is to get a 90% or higher on the test, and really driving the communication back to the group goals help as well. The third thing you can do is try and convert disruptive behavior into constructive behavior. So this is where you, like I said before, can ask the group member for a contribution, actually give them a task, make a list, follow up, give substantial comments regarding, how they did. So making them feel like they contribute and expect them to do something. And sometimes that can really help with the social loafer. You can confront the person directly and focus on their behavior and explain how it's really impacting the group. It should be individual. In no way should the entire group go speak to the social loafer. They'll feel ganged up on and will shut down. So it should be one-on-one, addressed by one person. If it continues after a certain amount of time, keep a record, but you can always report to a higher authority like a boss or a teacher and know that there'll be consequences there. So just know that you're going to end up dealing with the social loafer sometime in your group experience. Maybe it's happening now, and that unfortunately is a pretty common experience, but just ignoring them or giving them time to distract the group isn't the most effective way to handle them. So hopefully you wrote all those steps down. If not, if you want to go back and watch this video again, just ask the substitute to do that and write those steps down. Okay, the next concept we're going to talk about is systems theory. In small group development, there is a theory called systems theory, which shows the interworkings of a group. So there are three important terms when it comes to systems theory. The input, this is what all the group members bring to the group experience. So their attitudes, knowledge, skill, information, all of that. Whatever you as a group member and your other members bring to the group, that's the input. The output is what your group accomplishes and how you feel about the group experience. The throughput is the working ugly or the process of group work, where you're making decisions and taking actions and listening to each other and doing all that you can to complete the task. So that's why there's gears here, because it is the working part. Everybody brings something to the table, the input. You use all those attitudes, knowledge, skills, experience, and information to work, and you're making that work towards an output. That's the throughput. So think of it as like going through the gears or going through the process into the output. And that's what you're trying to do. So those three terms are associated with systems theory: input, throughput, and output. Make sure that you write those down. Group members must have a degree of interdependence. We've talked about this term before, but it ultimately means that the group members all share in the outcome, whether it's successful or not. So you work together to bring about an outcome. So your group is interdependence, is the working together. Sorry, I'm totally recording this at home and my neighbor's dogs are barking like crazy, so I really hope that it's not super distracting. But anyway, I'll try and talk a little louder and maybe talk over them. So the degree to which group members shares the outcome of the group's efforts to accomplish the task. So when we say your service project has to be interdependent, it means that you all have to work together in order to accomplish the task. So your work depends on everybody else, right? You need each other to finish the task. That's interdependence. And in order for systems theory to work, the interdependence comes here in the throughput, right? You're all engaged and dependent on working together to get to that output in the end. There's another term we use called interconnectedness, meaning that everything that you do has a ripple effect. This is an actual communication term on the group as a whole. So your decision not to study for a test, you show up, your group members are frustrated because you're not contributing to the group exam. So then they get mad at you. That makes it harder to do the service project. Other test scores suffer because of it. So you can see that there's when you make a decision in a group, it impacts all the group members in what's known as a ripple effect. There's one notable example. A couple of years ago, and it was probably like 2006, 2005, the Writers Guild of America went on strike. So all the writers that were writing sitcoms and TV dramas and movies went on strike for higher pay. and it was a small decision, right? This particular group that was a part of a bigger group, the entertainment industry, decided to go on strike. So there was no new movies for TV and no new scripts for movies and TV. If you watch like The Office, there's one season that's shorter than all the others, or other TV shows around that time because they didn't have scripts, right? They didn't have writers writing for them, so they weren't able to produce. So that small decision meant no new scripts. Networks were forced to show reruns, which lost revenue. It put actors, production crew, caterers, and agents, everybody was losing money because nothing new was being produced. They almost canceled the Academy Awards and the Golden Globes, which is a huge industry. And ultimately, by the time the strike was over, $3.5 billion was lost in revenue. So this group, the actions of one small member or membership, the Writers Guild, going on strike had a huge impact on the entire industry. So that's a perfect example of what that ripple effect, whoops, I lost it, what that ripple effect can do. So when a group is ripple effect can be positive too, right? Like group members can make positive decisions and it can ripple effect in positive ways. And when that happens, we actually call it synergy. And synergy is when the group performance, so everybody together does better than you would do on your own. So you have a synergistic group if everybody does better together than they do on their own. Think about this for our tests in our class. We have tests that are meant to promote synergy, meaning that you all study and come together and take the test, and you get a higher score as a group than you do as an individual, even though it's testing the same information. If that happens, your group usually has really positive synergy. It means that it's 1 + 1 is 3, right? It's better than you would be alone. So to get good synergy, you want to pool all your resources, right? You really work together and use the strengths of everybody. You have something called the group error correction function, and this is where the group is able to, without confrontation or without ruining the synergy, point out problems in each other's thinking, giving each other's feedback. I heard you doing this a lot when you were taking the test, being like, no, I don't think that's right because of this. And you were in such a synergistic mode that people weren't offended in the group. They knew that you were working towards the outcome of a high score on the test. If your group has deep diversity, so just different skills and knowledge and beliefs and abilities and problem solving strategies among the group, the more diverse the group is with these things, the stronger the group becomes because they have all these different resources they can pull from. So that helps if everybody has different backgrounds. That's why when I designed your groups, I tried to pull different group strengths in terms of that test that you took, whether you were precise or technical or confluent, or those pulling those means that you have diversity, right? You have different leadership styles and problem solving strategies within your group. There can be negative synergy. So when you get together, the product is worse than the individuals would do by themselves. I've seen this before in groups. The group test is lower than all the individual tests. It means when you get together, the climate and the energy between the group is negative and it's pulling the group down. It could be based on misinformation, it could be that led them down a path, but ultimately, groups can have negative or positive synergy depending on how they're working together as a group. So we're going to talk about just a couple more things, and then I'm going to have you take a group synergy test. So we'll come back to this synergy test in just a minute. Let me talk a little bit about the 6 features of effective groups. So make sure, we've been talking about the first 2 up until this point. So first was group size. Second was the interdependence, and within interdependence we talked about the systems theory, so the input, the throughput, and the output. We talked about synergy, right, and the ripple effect. All of that went under interdependence. The third feature of groups, so we're going back to this, is task. The group has to have a reason to exist. Without a reason to exist, you can't have a group, right? Whether it's a study group for a test in college, or a team for some intramural sports, or your boss puts you together to work on a particular pitch for a company, right? You have to have a task. Fourth, this is a word you've heard before, norms, the guidelines and rules to implement about how members should behave. So setting up norms for your group about how you'll study, how you'll work at the service project, how you'll take the tests together, what's the expectation for behavior, and how will you complete tasks. Having those makes your group much more effective. So talking about that can really help. Fifth, the group needs an identity. This is why some of you, one class has started, I think fourth period has done the group crest, and eighth period will do this when I get back, but we're going to help form your identity. So your identity right now is formed by the boundaries of this class. Because you're in this class, because you are required to be in a group, that's part of your physical boundary and psychological identity. But the more you get comfortable with each other, and even naming yourselves, while it sounds cheesy, that's part of group theory, is that you become this identity. And then finally, the last characteristic of an effective group is group talk. There is specific communication that groups use that is different than individual or interpersonal communication. There are two types. So kind of think about, does your group engage in problem-solving talk or decision-making talk? Probably a combination of both. Problem-solving talk is where you deal with one problem at a time. Decision-making talk is where you have to select from an option. So as you're deciding your service projects, your group may be engaging in decision-making talk. So they're getting together, and you're like looking at a bunch of options of what you could do for the service project, and you're making a decision. The same thing on your tests. You're engaging in a lot of decision-making talk, where you say things like, is it A, is it B, is it C, is it D, right? Working through that and deciding that way. Problem-solving talk is where you are looking at a specific problem. Okay, we've decided to do this service project, but we have a time conflict, and you're working through that problem. So good, effective groups will use both problem-solving talk and decision-making talk as they work, and the better they are at that, the stronger the group. In communication theory, they compare effective groups to 4 different types of teams. So within your professional and personal life, you're going to be a part of groups that are comparable to these types of teams. The first is the golf team analogy. Think about how a golf team operates. The team's score is determined at the end of the tournament by summing up the scores of each player. So they're not interdependent, meaning that my golf game does not rely on your golf game as we're playing, but at the end, the scores matter to the outcome, right? Like my score matters to the team's performance, but as I'm playing, it's not so interdependent. I like this this definition at the bottom. They play on a team, but not as a team. Think of some other sports where you really rely on the team members, like basketball, to really play together, right? We'll talk about that in a minute. So golf team, you have individual players whose performance contribute to a group score. So think about in a company where you're all working towards one final product, but everybody has their own task. So you're on a team, but you don't necessarily need those other members to do your job. That's the first type of analogy for teams. And this, you'll want to make sure you're writing these in your additional notes. The second analogy is the baseball team. So in this team or group, you have players who work best when there's a sequence of actions. Think about how scripted a baseball game can be, right? If you hit it to the far left field, then there's the most probable place to pitch it infield, right? Or to throw it infield, like to second base. Or if it goes too far along, right? There's like certain places to throw the ball. There's a sequence of events that is understood. everybody can operate individually, but what's unique about the baseball team that is different than the golf team is that players are in a fixed position. So it's not a very flexible position. You learn third base and that's your specialty. You're the pitcher and that's your specialty. You're still playing on a team, but not as a team. So you have all of your own specific jobs to do and you carry them out in sequence. That's very much like many groups and how they operate today. They have specific jobs that they carry out in a certain sequence. We're getting to more complex. The next one is a football team. If you think about a football team like the baseball team have fixed positions, right? You have the defense, the offense, the running back, the quarterback, the lineman, right? You have fixed positions, and that's pretty inflexible. Everybody operates independently, but you play as a team, and in the football team, you have a coach. You have a leader from the sidelines. Unlike like the golf team or the baseball team, the coach is much more present in the decision making. So if you think about how a football team and how much is called by the coach, it's way more than the other two. So in leadership analogy, you'll have a leader or a boss or even a teacher, right, directing the group and giving them the plays or the parts of the job that they need to do. One of the most effective teams is the tennis doubles team. So two players, primary and fixed, right? Someone's used to playing the left side and the right side, but they switch positions depending on the play. You adjust if you're playing in the front and you miss. Your teammate often will carry it or catch up the slack. There's basically no coaching. I mean, that's been actually in the news lately with Serena Williams. There's no coaching allowed during play, and the team is so effective that they don't need the coaching. They take the cues from the other members, and that's what we're trying to get your group to work towards is playing as this tennis doubles team where you're learning from each other, adjusting from each other's weaknesses. You don't necessarily need somebody over your shoulder directing all your actions and decisions. So that's kind of the ideal. Okay, what you're going to do now is you're going to engage in a group synergy test. So you're going to get into your groups and I'm going to give you a series of questions that speak to all sorts of skill, logic, a little bit of math, a little bit of creativity, and we're going to see how many your group can get right, drawing upon the deep diversity and skills that you have together as a group. The test is timed, so you will have 20 minutes to take the test, and then it will be scored. Obviously, the group with the highest score is the winner, right? You're not allowed to use any cellular devices to look up answers, just your brains and the skills that your group members have to answer the questions. So good luck, and we'll see which groups have higher synergy depending on what they bring to the table and the things that you're able to complete together. So start reading chapter 8. That's what we're going to be working on for the next couple days and when I get back.